The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle. Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 62, and our guest is Eliot Bronson. Eliot's new record, Empty Spaces, is a gorgeous, painful album about love and loss that will no doubt end up among my favorite records of the year. This conversation was such good medicine, y'all, and I am thrilled to bring it to you. You can find all things Eliot at eliotbronson.com. That's Eliot with one T. Everyone, my conversation with Eliot Bronson.
Last night you were in my dream.
All right, so I should be recording. Okay, cool. Well, if folks are listening to this, I just gushed about Eliot's record for a second, and I'm gonna gush more. But the sequencing is incredibly powerful, and so I want to talk about so much, and I want to just kind of go into like the decision that you made this time. So your other records have been produced by the great Dave Cobb, and you made the decision to produce this one yourself. What can you talk about making that decision, and like why you did it, and then I want to kind of go into the differences between the two.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and thanks for having me on the show. By the way, I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
You know, I have to answer that question kind of by backing up a couple steps, because everything about this record is kind of, it's all of a piece. This is a unapologetic breakup album, obviously, to anybody who hears it. And it was a big life change. I moved to Nashville. I wrote all the songs, and my life just kind of changed pretty dramatically. And what I thought I would do was go to Nashville, like chase down a publishing deal, try to be a full-time writer during the day, and and tour as much as I could on the side, and then make a record either with Dave again or maybe another hotshot in Nashville and a new band. And I had this vision about where this was going to take my career. And basically going to Nashville, it taught me kind of a bunch of things that I didn't expect it to teach me, and it made me actually double down on who I was as an individual. And I was co-writing every day and trying to play the game and doing all right, I think, at it. I wrote a lot of songs I liked, but I was writing, I was having 4 or 5 writing sessions a week, sometimes a couple a day. And then I would go home at the end of the day and write a song just for me. And it would be the only one I cared about for the week, So as I was compiling these songs, I started realizing, that what was most important was, the songs that I really cared about, not so much writing some sort of objectively great song. I came to believe that didn't exist, and all that really matters is to make something that's really important to you, and if you can do that and honor it, then you'll make something that will end up being important to other people. And so that informed my decision of who to make the record with and how to make the record, because I went around and talked to a bunch of producers and showed them the songs, and got good reactions from people. But the more I thought about it, I was like, man, this is just so important to me. This is my life. I'm singing about my life. I'm writing these incredibly personal songs, And I ended up making the decision, which was the opposite of what the direction I thought I was going in. I went back to Atlanta, got my buddies together. We made the record at my friend's house, and I just thought, like, this is the right decision. This seems like the opposite of the direction I thought I was going in, the trajectory I thought I was going in, but it was I knew it was totally right as soon as we started doing it, because these guys, they just cared so much about me. They knew my story. They knew what I'd been through. They knew what the songs were about, and they invested themselves in it in a way that no matter how great the producer or band was going to be, they just wouldn't have been able to. So that's the short version, I guess.
That's so exciting. That's so wonderful that you
Yeah.
had that support system, and that you were able to go back to Atlanta, which is like, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of the source of a lot of these songs was things that happened in Atlanta, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I lived in Atlanta for, about 15 years or so, and, this relationship that this record talks about a lot, happened in Atlanta, and there's a song about Atlanta and about leaving. So, yeah, it's definitely that chapter of my life. And it just, it did make sense to make it there with the people who surrounded me during that period, and like, my longtime bandmates, people who were like, you have my back. I tried it the other way, and it's not to say we didn't get great results, because I think we did get really good results, but there's just nothing like, buddies in a room giving a shit, like wearing their heart on their sleeve and making something for themselves. Like that, I think, is where like a lot of the real magic can happen.
God, that's a great point, man. The other day I played an open mic, and I was stiff. I was real stiff. Like I played a new song that I hadn't played for anybody, and I just wasn't confident. And as a result, it just the whole set, like, it wasn't as bad as, of course, my anxiety told me it was. But I wasn't playing loose, and I wasn't connected to the songs because I wasn't comfortable. Like that need for when you're creating, especially if you're creating something personal like you did, that need to be comfortable and to be in a place where you're supported is so important. And I think sometimes we neglect that. Especially, it's so interesting to me that you had the publishing. You were doing the publishing deal work, and then going home and writing the stuff that you were really passionate about. So it's like, you're doing the work and you're continuing to get better because you're going through you're flexing those muscles. But the stuff that really mattered to you was that personal stuff that you were doing just for you.
That's totally right. Yeah. Both those both are very good points. The point about being comfortable, I think, is key in a performing art. It's not like painting where you make it and it just sits there. You know what I mean? Every time you sing that song, you recreate it. And, you can only do that well in a place where you're out of your own head, and you can only get out of your head when you're comfortable. So that's definitely true. And then the second point, I was definitely, I think it's a great discipline to write a lot, because you definitely, it's like, I think creativity is more of a habit. And as you get into the habit of doing it, it's easier to tap back into it. So I was writing way more songs in that period than maybe I've ever written in my life. I'm sure than I've ever written in my life. So that was a really good thing. But I tell this story sometimes. Like one of the first nights I'd been to Nashville a ton. Obviously, I made 2 records there, and living in Atlanta, it's not that far away. But it's very different when you move there, and people treat you different, and you're in the club. So, one of the first not open mics. It was a round. They do some rounds in Nashville where you get 3 artists on stage and they sing songs, right? And take turns. And I went to this round that my management at the time, like, come down. This girl we're working with is going to be playing. So I went to this round. And, in Nashville, it's just like the best of everybody. There's the best singers, the best guitar players, the best writers. I mean, they're all there in this town. It's crazy. And I went to this show. I didn't know any of the people. It was like 3 girls in their like early 20s. They were all gorgeous. They all had amazing voices. They were all singing songs that were perfectly crafted. It was top notch. They were in like the top, 0.5% of technical ability and skill and look. And there's a lot of those people there. And I was watching this show, and then I was looking around the room at this bar. It was just a regular old bar. And half the people, it was half full room, and half the people seemed to care, and the other half are, just mildly interested. And I really had this moment where I had to say, like, what's happening right now? I mean, I'm watching Olympic level, musicians, artists on stage, and nobody gives a shit. Like, and and then and it clicked, and something clicked with me in that moment that I took with me the whole rest of the time and until now. And what clicked was those girls actually didn't really care about what they were doing either. Like, the songs were co-writes. They weren't really about their life. They weren't risking anything. It wasn't edgy. It wasn't scary. You know, it was pretty safe stuff. And what I realized was you can't ask an audience to care if you don't care. So then I was like, okay, I get this. Like, I'm not going to be the best singer in the world, the best guitar player in the world, or whatever that even means, but I can tell my story as bravely and honestly as possible. And if I do that, it will be compelling. As long as I stick to that, like that's the North Star. So after that, realization, it was a lot easier to sort of, when I go home and write those songs just for me, I kind of had a sense. I was like, it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. I think part of me was like, yeah, this is actually where it's at. And I'm going to keep trying this publishing thing, but I have a suspicion that it's going to fizzle out for me. And it did.
You use the word brave there, and I think that is a pretty courageous act to make that decision. How easy was it to come to that realization? Did you have to wrestle with it at all, or was it just an aha moment that then everything was different?
It was it was an aha moment. Obviously, it sticks with me, and I've told that story, several times now, so I know that was like a pretty big, I don't know if it's a realization. Like, there's this. I'm a meditator, and there's this Buddhist teacher. One time she said this 80-something-year-old grandma, and she, in this really sweet way, she said this thing that's also stuck with me, which is like, we don't learn new lessons. We just keep relearning the same lesson. We just learn it better. So it wasn't like the first time I'd ever thought about the idea of being brave and singing about what I care about. Of course, I've always thought about that, but it was like, oh, I just learned it again. Like, I learned it better than before. So it just reaffirmed, I think, a core belief in me. And then, I would put that into action. I'd play these songs and I would share them with my friends, and I would see, like, okay, they really care about that song, and I'd be like, what about this song over here? And I'd pull in something that I co-wrote with somebody that was super crafty and Nashville-y, and they wouldn't care, and it would just be like, I see, I see what's going on here. It's like, there's something about craft and skill. I mean, no doubt, you can't get to any level without, like, putting in years of practice and know-how. You have to get beyond your mind, and that takes, you have to learn it in your body, and you have to understand craft inside and out. But at a certain point, you have to go beyond craft, or else it's just not compelling. It's just not interesting,
Yeah, absolutely. But working on the craft as like you do and like you did, then allows for you to take that emotion and take that personal feeling, and then also craft these wonderful songs with that feeling in it. But you kind of have to have the both, right? You got to be able to do the work.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who can just do it, like everybody puts in the fucking work.
Yeah, no, you got to put in and there's no way to get around the fact that you got to work at it. I mean, there's it's funny when you analyze stories of people who were like child prodigies. It just turned out that they started way earlier. They were 5. So it's really, I think there's no substitute for hard work. But I think one thing can happen is, like, as you get better and as you internalize the craft, you start to understand, like, why, like, not like, we're not doing these crafty things for the sake of it, right? Like, a chorus makes sense. Like, there's a reason for repeating things. There's a reason for turns of phrase, and you start to understand it more intuitively. And then you can, like, get to the point of why you're doing it in the first place. You're not doing it just to show how crafty and clever you are. If you're doing that, then, fine. But maybe, you should be in a different profession, writing Hallmark cards or something. I don't know. But maybe there's a better example. There probably is, but you want to like, these are tools, and then you want to use those tools to communicate something meaningful or important to you. They're not an end in themselves.
Yeah, I just finished Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh, great book.
Oh my God! But he talks about that. He talks about the toolbox, right? So he talks about having those tools in your toolbox, and he doesn't. They're so simple too. Like for him, it's things like vocabulary, right?
Right.
These, it's such a great book because there's so much in there that you're kind of like, well, no shit, but I haven't thought about it this way, And there are those moments when somebody like that's talking to you, and you're like, yeah, but you're fucking Stephen King, like. Gotcha, but come on, man.
Yeah, no.
Did you there? it seems like as I listen to the record, there's my favorite stretch of it, and I love the whole thing. My favorite stretch is the middle section. She loves the mountains through Mountain in My Mind.
Cool.
Yeah, and there seems to be like, I mean, it's such a, you write about place in a way that very few people do. I think that you're able to sort of describe the place itself, but also, especially in Atlanta, but also to explain your experience in that place. And I wonder, when I listen to those songs, how much place impacts your writing. And you mentioned a couple of things: Nashville, how things are in Nashville, deciding to go back to Atlanta. Are you conscious of that, or is that just something that I'm projecting onto it because I find it interesting?
No, I think you're right on. It's a lesson. Maybe I learned it from Paul Simon. I really try to anchor the listener in a physical space. If I don't name like a state or a town, I'll often describe a scene. And I really think like early on in a song to give people a visual, to give people something really concrete, to set the stage, you know, before you have the play, like to really give them something with some teeth, like some, to mix a metaphor terribly there. So I, you know, this record of course was about place because it's about me living in Atlanta, about my fiance going out west, about me moving to Nashville. So place is definitely all throughout this record. But it's not. I mean, I've written a lot about Baltimore, where I was born. I've written a lot about a lot of cities, and I don't fully understand why I do it, but I do think there is something to do with anchoring the song in a physical space and a time. So it's not just floating, you know, it's not just floating out there for you to interpret any way you want. Like I'm going to put you here, and then and then we'll see what happens.
Especially with something this deeply personal. That's a great point.
Yeah. And I just, I think this, like using the sense in writing, like describing, like, is really early in the song can just be if you start analyzing songs, you'll notice like it happens a lot that's I just picked it up again as a tool in my toolbox, but I'll often start writing that way. Like, the way I write is I just have my guitar in hand and I just start kind of messing around going. I don't use paper and pen. I write it all out loud. And I just sing things to myself. But I often need that physical space, too. I need to imagine myself somewhere, and sometimes it's where I am. I'll look around and I'll see something interesting in the room. But a lot of times it's not. She Loves the Mountain is a perfect example of that. I start off that song by describing these wildfires happening in Montana. Smoke from the wildfire filled up the valley. And so right away, like that's where you are. Make no mistake, we are in a wildfire situation in Montana, and then I can tell you this heartbreak story about what happened to me. But if I start with the heartbreak, it's just less compelling.
Yeah, well, and there's right, exactly, but also and also I should say, not but also, and also you're taking these really difficult themes and these things that all of us can relate to, right? Like,
right.
We haven't had your particular experience, but we've all had that kind of experience, or most of us have.
Right.
And like it made me, listening to it made me think of one particular relationship and just like how devastating it was, and also made me wonder how you were able, because like when something like that happens to me, I don't create very well. Like it like I guess depression or anxiety gets the best of me in those moments.
Yeah.
Were you able, like, did you have to get some space between what happened and the writing of the songs, or was it contemporaneous?
Yeah, great question. And I totally understand what you're saying. And let me answer the first part too, because the first thing you said was about the particulars. And I do think this is like a core belief of mine, that by telling your story in its particulars, it's all its quirky, unique detail, you give people a doorway to enter not only into your world, but into their own, where being more general and vague most of the time, you would think that I could fill in the details myself of my own life, but that's not what people do. They need the entry point of your specific life, and then they can go to their own. But if you just make it very broad, they won't even go to their own. They won't go anywhere. So I think that's really important. This record is like, I've joked to my friends that it's sort of like a stages of grief record because it kind of hits all the different emotions. And so I wrote them over a period of a year or more. And so some of those songs, no way I could have written right out of the gate, And I wrote a couple songs right out of the gate that didn't make the record. They were just too raw. So, yeah, it takes some time to process. Like a song like She Loves the Mountains, that was in the middle. And it was like I needed to get over the initial devastation. And it's a heartbreak song, but it has, I think, a perspective where it has a little bit of kindness in it too, where it's like I'm trying to see your perspective, but I'm still got my own back here. And to get to that point, that wasn't going to happen in a week or a month. It took 6 months or so. So yeah, I mean, I think, and sometimes things take way longer than you might imagine. Like a song might pop out years after an event that I hadn't realized I'd been sort of digesting for a long period of time. When you're really in the moment of like really breaking down, I don't think anybody's going to be very creative.
Right. Right. I did wonder, I mean, you mentioned meditation. Like I wondered if your meditative practice might help you to get there, or there might be things that you do for self-care yourself that allow you maybe to deal with those really difficult, almost impossible situations, in the moment. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, so definitely there are tools that I have gathered for dealing with difficult times through my meditation practice and through Buddhism. And some of those are like the exclusive domain of like self-care, not so much about creativity at all, just like survival coping mechanisms and tools. And I'm happy to talk about those. And I use those. And then my daily like sitting, I sit every day for about 30 minutes, sometimes 45. And that the effects of that are more long term. Like you can't necessarily, I don't like jump up from sitting and like write a song. Like it's not so, you know what I mean? It's not so linear. It's not, I can't connect the dots like that, but I can see a change over years, over months. And what I noticed in this writing period was a certain amount of freedom that I allowed myself in my writing. And I can't say for sure that that's because of meditation, but meditation does free you up from repeating the same, playing the same tape in your mind over and over again, which is what we do, right? So it really helps creativity to stop playing the same damn tape so that you can tune into other things, say things you have never said before in a way that you've never said them before. Like a song like Mountain in My Mind, which is such a strange song to me. Like, I would have never written that song 5 years ago before I was practicing every day. I just think I would have been like, what the hell is this? I just would have discounted it right out of hand.
So how did you, let's get into this because I think that's really helpful for people. I know it's helpful for me. I think meditation is a sporadic part of my life and has not become a habit the way that it should. And this is inspiring to me to do that because I know, like you mentioned habit earlier, I know, for example, I get up and do morning pages every morning.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and when I'm in it, dude, I have to do it. Like I didn't today, and I feel off.
I get it. I totally get that.
But I think for some people get intimidated by the idea of meditation, and I think it's helpful to hear from somebody who does practice regularly, just the idea specifically that you will experience the long-term effects of it, and it doesn't come like in this strike of lightning, right? It's more a cumulative effect.
Right. I mean, there are cool things that happen. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, but I mean, and I'm not a meditation teacher, and I don't claim to be, but I can regurgitate some things that I've learned over the years, and the idea of wanting to have those lightning bolt moments, having those big breakthroughs, those epiphanies, or those euphoric experiences that can happen in meditation, like having that mindset or that expectation or even that hope is actually counter to the practice, because the practice is all about being with whatever comes up. So if you're sitting there with an agenda of having something amazing happen, then you're just going to sit there and get frustrated, and it's probably not going to happen. So the practice is like meeting whatever's there, and so and there's all kinds of forms and different kinds of teachings, and there's all kinds of ways that are great. But I honestly think if any time of sitting quietly with yourself, and I think a timer is helpful, just so you can commit to a time and just don't take that worry off of the plate. Like it's not gonna. I'm gonna be here for 10 minutes, or I'm gonna be here for 5 minutes, whatever it is. Commit to it, so you don't sit there thinking, have I done enough yet? Like, is it now is it time to get up? Like, I remove that by having a timer and be with yourself. And even, there's a million different practices I could, tell you what I do, and I could point you in different directions. But even I think just sitting there with yourself and just looking at your own mind and just being your company, being your own company. Even that alone, I think that would do wonders.
Do you are you sitting in a particular posture when you meditate?
I sit in sort of what they call half lotus, so it's like kind of Indian style, one leg over the other. But they say to sit upright, they say to sit with your spine straight, but you don't want to get hung up on that either. It's if you're sitting upright, then you're more likely to be alert, and it is sort of like you don't want to fall asleep, and you don't want to be like in like a coma. So I think that's the main point of that directive. But I've heard people say they lie down and meditate. You certainly can walk and meditate. For me, I just have a little cushion under my butt. I sit on it on the floor, and I don't like stress out about it. Like, definitely don't want to make that into like the whole point.
Right. Yeah. That's great. That's really helpful, I think, for folks. It's helpful for me for sure, because I think sometimes we attach to outcomes so much, and that is not the point of meditating. That is what you're supposed to be doing.
It's gonna work again. It's gonna work against you. But then, of course, the mind is so tricky that you could turn that into a thing. You could be like, "Well, I'm so bad at not letting things happen." Like you can really twist yourself into knots. So, like, whatever you need to do. Like, if you you could say like, "Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and worry." Like, you know what I mean? Just give yourself permission. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna be bad at this for this 10 minutes. I'm gonna sit here and meditate terribly. Like, that could be just. That's fine.
Terrible meditation is like the most boring sketch I can picture. Just people being
well,
bad.
We're also. We're also in this culture. I think we're also hung up on like perfection and awards and achievement, and like I want to be able to prove that I'm good at this, and like. One of my favorite quotes from a Zen teacher is like, meditation is good for nothing. Like, this is one thing that you're going to do and get nothing out of. Embrace it.
This is great, man. This is coming at a perfect time. I'm reading Living Buddha, Living Christ right now. And
Thich Nhat Hanh, yeah.
Yeah. And my therapist put me on a spiritual journey a while back, and it's been a slow process, but I think that, again, goes back to what we were just discussing, and the fact that you can't like go on your spiritual journey and then 6 weeks later expect to have shit figured out. That's not how it works.
No, if you're doing it right, you're gonna have less figured out.
Right, yeah, and that's what's happening. That is exactly what's happening. Oh man,
yeah, you're on the right track. Congratulations.
Oh man, yeah, thanks. So I guess I'm good at it. Not good at it.
Yeah, it's best not to worry about it. It's best not to evaluate, I think, and just sort of keep going. And but it's great, man. That's a great book. I did a retreat actually when I was like 19 with Thich Nhat Hanh. It's like one of my first exposures to Buddhism, and what an amazing being.
Yeah, that's that part of your life is really interesting to me. I grew up in the Baptist church, and
oh, cool.
Yeah, that's part of why my therapist put me on that journey, because we were just discussing like the impact that growing up in the church has on you. For some people, it's great, and it does really great things for them. But I'm coming to grips with just how much damage growing up that way did.
I can relate. Yeah.
And so I'm interested. That's interesting to me that you went on that retreat at 19. So that's pretty young that you were starting to kind of try to figure things out outside of the way you were raised, right?
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a freak. But yeah, we grew up, my grandparents were Pentecostal ministers, but I had a lot of mixed messages because my dad, he did some preaching, and he grew up in the church, like physically in the church. They lived like in the church itself, and we went there as kids, and people spoke in tongues. But then he kind of became this sort of like radical leftist, and so it was like, my mom would be like, "Did you get, you sure you're saved?" And then we'd be like, like revolution, like, so it was confusing, like. Wasn't really sure what was going on.
That's interesting. Yeah. See, so for me, the experience was like, if you're Protestant, you're going to heaven, and everyone else is going to hell, and those were your two options, and that's.
Oh, I got that message clear,
Okay,
loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's the thing that fucks you up. It's like that dichotomy.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's just so weird, man. Like looking at it now, I'm just like, it didn't seem right to me at the time, and it really doesn't seem right to me now. Especially
it's totally. I think kids have a innate sense of fairness, or at least hopefully they do, or they learn it. But like, and then you're teaching them that there's this all powerful being who is like a psychopath. So, like, it really doesn't square. He loves you, but he will torture you for all eternity. So don't mess this up.
But all you have to do is say this one prayer, and you're good.
Right.
Is like the other
right.
really. Oh my God! I'm not trying to skewer religion as a whole here. I just mean speaking from my experience, that it's something that I think I'll always have to continue to wrestle with.
Well, yeah, I think that group membership, that sort of tribal mentality that's baked into a lot of fundamentalism is something to get over. And yeah, I mean, I got good things out of religion being a kid. I was glad that I was introduced to the notion of a spiritual dimension to reality. Like, I was glad that there was like, even though it didn't really give me any of the tools to work with it at that point, like I was on board with like, okay, there's more than we can see, and there's more to life than just, we're just like meat and dirt, so like it probably started me questioning, and then very quickly it was like, but what do we do with this? And then coming across meditation as a teenager, it was really attractive to me, because not only now was there this talk about, spiritual dimension and meaning in life, but then here's some things you can actually do. Rather than just keep, like, all I got in church was like, ask for favors and hope you get them.
Right.
At least in my church. And I know that is not the whole of Christianity, but there was a lot of that. And the idea of meditation, or like direct connection with something divine, was actually viewed very suspiciously. Like, people who do that, like, that's like you're opening the door for the devil. Like, watch out.
Well, what a gift to think about it from the perspective that you had. The idea that of being open to spirituality. What a gift for a creative person. That opens up so much in your creative, your creative mind. I think being open to that, and this book talks all about that. This Living Buddha, Living Christ.
Yeah,
talks all about being open to not knowing, and to not necessarily understanding. That's a huge gift to the creative.
Yeah, I've thought a few times about how few, creatives I know, truly creative people I know who don't have some spiritual bent, because when you're, you get in touch with this when you're creating over and over again, that you write something, you create something, you make something, and it doesn't feel like you understood where it came from. It happens so often that you just, it's like you're tapping into something, and you don't really have the words for it. You don't really understand it, but you know it exists. It's very difficult, I think, to go around and be like a very hardcore atheist. Like, there's nothing and there's no meaning, and yet I'm pulling this beautiful meaning out of the universe. The universe is meaningless, and yet I'm creating meaningful things in it. It doesn't square, and so yeah, I think that is. I've noticed that disposition in other creative people, and also like this that you mentioned, not knowing. I mean, I think that is like that's sort of like the womb of creativity, right? Because when you don't know, anything's possible. Like that's what we talk about in Zen mind, beginner mind. Like, you know, in the beginner's mind, in the master's mind, there are a few what was he say? There are a few possibilities. In the master's mind, there are a few possibilities. In the beginner's mind, there are many. Therefore, always keep the beginner's mind. And then he goes on to say, and this is Suzuki Roshi, he goes on to say, and this is actually the secret to the arts too. So when you said that, that was very, I think, astute. Right on.
Awesome. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. That's a book that you're citing there?
Oh, yeah. So there's a book called Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, or Beginner's Mind, which is a classic, and it's fantastic. And it's just these short talks by Shunroi Suzuki, who's a Zen priest who came to the United States, I think, in the 70s, and just little essays that I think were originally Dharma talks that he gave in his center. But yeah, that one in particular, when he talks about keeping the beginner's mind, the not knowing, and there are other people who have spoken about that too in different ways, but. Yeah, when you can't really, when you have all the answers, like think about the people you know who are the most sure of they're the least creative people.
Yeah, that is so true, man. Oh my gosh, yeah, I don't spend, and I hope this doesn't sound pretentious at all. I don't spend a lot of time around folks like that. I don't.
No, I don't either.
You know?
But I run into them, and I've,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know tons of them. And I think that, I talk on the show a lot about, and in my writing, I write about this a lot too, especially in songwriting, but that happens a lot in smaller communities in my experience, like insular kind of communities.
Yeah.
Everybody's just got life figured out, man. And those people, like that concept is scary as shit to me. I mean, I think that's how we end up with some of the ills that plague our society at the moment.
Well, whatever are you talking about?
It's funny. I've been starting all these conversations off, since March. I've done several episodes remotely like this. And I've started every conversation off with just like, how are you doing? And I feel terrible because of the technical difficulties. I didn't ask you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I am doing relatively well. I think definitely considering what's out there, what people are going through, right now. It's like I feel lucky.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, me too, man. It's
that's awesome. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. Thanks. So I don't want to take much more of your time. This has been awesome.
Sure.
Yeah. We always end with so you gave us a little bit of homework with the book. What else are you consuming? Like, what are you listening to right now? What are you watching? What art has you fired up right now?
Oh man, I'm in like a weird phase because like the record hasn't come out yet, and we're in this like promotion phase. We're releasing singles and doing interviews and things like this, and so like this is not a period where I'm writing a ton, and I write pretty much all the time except for like in this little window. And so like I've been listening to all this like weird ambient music and things that like are not in my wheelhouse at all, but like just go on Spotify and be like, what's this ambient chill stuff, and like putting that on, and it's been really interesting. And I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts. 10% Happier has a really great one, speaking of meditation and interviewing really smart people who, and it's not just about meditation. It's like thinkers and writers, journalists, and folks like that. So I'm all kinds of stuff, but I can't say I'm consuming a ton of the music of the kind of music that I'm making at this moment.
That's interesting. I love that though. I mean, I think that's so helpful for process in general. I mean, especially getting out of that. I will go to my blankie, which is folk Americana, bluegrass, that kind of stuff. That American roots music, specifically Southern roots music. Like I will go to that shit, and I'll have to catch myself sometimes, not because that stuff isn't really important and beautiful and and I don't love it. It's just that it's so comfortable for me that I keep going back to it, and then I don't push myself. So recently I've been like committed to listening to more hip hop. I've been committed to listening to more soul. And And that used to be, it's funny, I don't know, like that used to be how I consume music, especially as I was learning, right? Is like, I wouldn't just listen to one thing. It was constantly me pulling new ideas and new things and trying to learn. You know, I'd listen to Dylan in the morning, and then I'd listen to NWA in the afternoon, you know, like trying to figure it all out, you know, like Ravi Shankar or something, you know, just really trying to figure stuff out. And I want to get back to that. Like that, I guess that circles back to the conversation about the beginner's mind, right? It's like, I need to get back to that kind of an attitude.
Well, I hear you on that. And I think just knowing like what season you're in, you know, of consuming or whatever, you know, like, cause I've gone down the rabbit hole. I mean, like there would be months where I just listened to nothing but Dylan and just like every album, you know, and like just like went in there and learned every lyric. And so, but you know, you get to a point where you're like, all right, like I've really got all the Americana records, you know, pretty well digested at this point. Like I don't want to, I'm in danger at this point, you know, cause it's been a long time. I'm in danger of just remaking the same record myself. So I have to watch what my input is. Like, you know, I've got to start putting some other influences in there. Otherwise, that was really intentional for this record. And I don't know if you heard it as opposed to my last two records, but I was just like, I mean, I love the sound of train beats and pedal steel guitars and, you know, that raw Americana vibe. I mean, it's like my bread and butter, but like I consciously was like, let's listen to some indie folk. Let's listen to some other sounds. Let's layer some harmonies. Let's do some things that are fun and just a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and make something I've never heard. Let's make something new. So knowing where you're at in that, you know, sometimes you need to, you know, you need to binge, whatever it might be, Whiskey Town or something. But like in other times, you just need to put on ambient chill.
Yeah, well, that's great, man. I mean, it comes through. It definitely comes through. This is a different record. I love your other stuff, man, but this is. I'm crazy about this album, man.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Jason.
I mean, I've been listening to it constantly, but I'm gonna go listen to it again as soon as we get done. Dude,
well, that means the world to me. I'm glad I connected.
Yeah, this was great. I'm very motivated. I'm gonna make meditation a part of my regular routine. It fits
that's
nicely
great.
with my morning pages, so that's gonna be nice.
No, you're
right? Like they work together well, I think so.
Absolutely, totally.
Dude, thank you so much. This was such a
pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, it was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
All right, man. Take care.
Take care. All right,
Eliot Bronson, y'all. Again, such good medicine. His record Empty Spaces comes out on July 24th. Check it out. Go to eliotbronson.com to keep up with all things Eliot. He's also on the social medias. Go to marinadepodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces and concert photography. You could also pick up some swag in our store. We've got hats on the way. Unfortunately, UPS has lost our hats, so thank you for being patient. If you pre-ordered, we will get them to you as soon as possible, and I can't wait to see these things. Follow The Marinade on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, y'all. I'm very seriously considering backing off of Facebook, just taking The Marinade off of Facebook for a number of reasons. Privacy concerns, and I'm also incredibly concerned about the way that that Facebook interacts with the Trump administration. So give us some feedback. Let me know. Am I overreacting? Should I go ahead and do it? Is there anybody out there who's a fan of The Marinade and connects with the show only through that channel or prefers to connect through that channel? Help me make this decision, please, because I don't want to pull off of there if there's somebody who interacts with the show that way or gets updates that way, and would miss out otherwise. But you know, we're available everywhere, and there's marinadepodcast.com where you can keep up Well, obviously, we're on all major podcast platforms, very active on Twitter, very responsive on Twitter. So let us know what you think, and I'll make that decision fairly soon because I don't want to drag my feet with it. I want to either stay in or back out for right now. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can get exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that have shaped and continue to shape my creative life. Patreon is just a personal way to connect with the show, and it helps us. I can do this without Patreon, but barely. It would be difficult to keep this going because there is a little bit of overhead, but Patreon takes care of that, and it also just allows me to connect with fans and friends of the show on a deeper level, and I really cherish that and appreciate that. So check it out, patreon.com/Marinade Podcast if you can swing it. If you can't, or if you're taking your treasure to more worthy causes, that's cool too. All those free things are incredibly helpful. Word of mouth is probably the biggest way that we spread the word about the show. So thank y'all so much for listening. Thank you so much for telling people about the show. All right, y'all, it's time for what I'm getting down on, the segment where I talk about the art that is inspiring me at the moment. I have had such a hard time during the pandemic reading. Just really struggled to read. I'd read a page or two and then get distracted, check my phone, maybe even take a nap. Like whatever was going on, it's like I tended to be pretty productive, actually. I created a whole bunch of podcasts. I wrote a lot, but I wasn't able to read for whatever reason. And I think I broke through that funk with 2 books back to back. I read Haruki Murakami's What I Talk About When I Talk About Running and Stephen King's On Writing, and I just plowed through both of them. Can't say enough about those 2 books. I've been listening to a lot of stuff lately. I have worn out and just can't stop listening to RTJ4, the new Run the Jewels record. I've been a fan of both those guys for a long time, Killer Mike and LP. Killer Mike is just one of the great leaders of our time, cultural leaders of our time. And I loved his solo stuff. I love the stuff that he does with LP, and then LP's same thing. Just if you're not hip to LP's music, or if you just know him through Run the Jewels, go back through his back catalog also. I know I've talked about it on the show, but it's worth revisiting. Some of those old records, Cancer for Cure, So Good, Flyentology. There's just so many. I'm sorry, I'll Sleep When You're Dead is the name of the record. Check those out. There's just so much good stuff from those guys. They're so smart and so relevant, consistently relevant. The new Jamie Wyatt is awesome. If you haven't listened to it, if you're listening to the show, you probably have listened to it. But if you haven't, check it out. And the brand new Phoebe Bridgers that just came out yesterday, I'm recording this on Friday, is phenomenal. It's a whole world she's created. It's just beautiful. And I think I listened to it 3 times back to back last night. Can't say enough about that record too. So lots of great music. I could probably do that forever. Eliot Bronson's new record is wonderful as well. There's just so much great stuff that people are putting out right now. It's God, it's crazy. I wish I could see some of these shows. I wish I could see some of these people out. The last thing I wanted to tell you about is that I decided to order some Marinade masks. So they're masks that have the surfboard logo on them. We don't really. It's through one of those companies that'll make it, and you can order straight through them. And I'll put a link up on marinadepodcast.com, and there's one on Twitter and Facebook also. I think we get like $1 from each mask, I guess, something like that. So whatever we get, I'm going to donate to fairfight.org. Fairfight, again, is that organization that's just working to make sure people have access to voting, which is crazy that we call ourselves a democracy and we have to worry about this. But if people will vote, then some of the more egregious, terrible individuals, the Trumps, the Ron DeSantis of the world, will be defeated. They're just going to lose. So we got to vote. And Fair Fight's working to make sure people have access to that. So if you buy a mask, I'm not going to make any money off of them. I'll just take that money and donate it to Fair Fight. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Eliot. If you can do it, guys, go out and create something. If not, don't be hard on yourself. Until next time, cheers, y'all.